So a very warm welcome to everyone to our course, which we are calling as Overview of Gita. Today is our 49th class. It's almost over 1 year now we have been doing these classes. Today we will be starting a fresh chapter, which is chapter number 14, titled as Three Modes of Material Nature. We will start with our Mangalacharan prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayamarupa Kadamayyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guruna Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमोऽस्तुते तप्तकाञ्चन गौराङ्गी श्रीराधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। So the slide that you see now on your screen is the overview chart of chapter 14. It's a relatively small chapter, only 27 verses. We plan to cover this entire chapter in two classes. So the first class we are doing it today. And the overview chart, the first section of this chapter describes about the conditioning of soul by the modes. We already have some discussion on modes of material nature while we were discussing our chapter number 7. We in fact also had a dedicated workshop on modes of material nature. So it is not that the participants in this class are entirely unaware of the modes, and it's one of the very interesting topics in the Bhagavad Gita. So the first section of this chapter is where the Lord describes about how the soul gets conditioned by the modes, and we will explain what is meant by condition. The second section is about recognizing the prominence of the modes. So the modes actually interact with each other, and there is a competition among the modes. So there is a few verses where the Lord speaks about how the modes compete and how to recognize which mode is predominantly applicable at that moment of time. In the third section, we will be discussing about the effect of conditioning of the modes. What if you are in a particular mode, then what is the result of that being in a particular mode? What are the effects? And in the last section, we will discuss how to transcend these modes, how to go over these modes of material nature. So, like for every other chapter, we are uh, also giving you a sutra word for chapter number 14, which is three modes of material nature. And the sutra word for the chapter 14 is trap. T stands for three modes, where the Lord explains about how the living entity gets conditioned by the modes. R is race for prominence, as we discussed. This is the competition. A stands for actions in the modes, where you can understand what are the effects of these modes, what are the results of these modes. And P stands for pure life, which means that if you lead a life of a certain nature, then you can transcend these modes and go beyond the modes. So in this picture, I have shown you a picture. In this slide, I have shown a picture of a lady being trapped in a rat cage, in a rat trap. So the idea to convey with this picture is that the modes actually bind us. The Sanskrit word for modes is called gunas, and one of the meaning of gunas is rope. So the rope bind us. And the way the reason the sutra word for this particular chapter is trap, because these modes actually captivate us. They don't allow us to move towards the spiritual realm or to the spiritual arena of things. So that is why the word trap. And you can see this lady is a business lady having a bag in her hand, so which indicates of the modern life we are leading these days, and the way the modern life and the impressions that come through on our mind in the modern life, they bind us toward to the modes, and how to get out of it, that is the main subject matter of this chapter. So before we begin with our regular study of these verses in this chapter, we like to have a little discussion on uh, what is the link of this chapter number 14 with the previous chapter, which is chapter number 13. And if you recall in the workshop also, I briefly mentioned about this verse 13.22, which the acharyas have mentioned as a bij vakya or mahavakya. Bij vakya means it's a seed verse which leads to the further chapters in the Bhagavad Gita. So in the 13th chapter, 22nd verse, the verse says, Purusha prakriti sthohi bhumte prakritir jan guna karanam guna sangasyo sad asad yonisu janmasu. Now, in this particular verse, we have Purusha Prakriti Sthohi, Bhungte Prakritir Jan Gunan, Karanam Guna Sangasya. So, the word Guna, which is the modes of material nature, is used in the third line. So, the point is that in this particular verse, we have Guna, we have Purusha, we have Sad Asad Yoni, like that. So the word guna is representing of the modes of material nature, and that is where it leads to the 14th chapter. The Purusha leads to the Purushottam, because there are two Purushas. One is the soul and another one is the super soul. So the real Purusha, who's the real enjoyer, is the Purushottam. So that is the 15th chapter, which is Purushottam Yoga. Then Sad Asad Yonisu. Sad Asad Yonisu means good and the bad species. So in the 14th chapter, you will learn that by developing certain modes, we get a certain kind of a body after we die. So Sad Asad. So good body is Sad. Asad is the bad body or the bad birth. So Sad Asad. So you will see the 16th chapter is divine and demoniac. You see the divine is the higher class, which is the higher consciousness. Demoniac is the lower consciousness. So that is 16th chapter. And then Arjuna asks, so there would be people somewhere between. There would be people somewhere, they are not fully divine, not fully demoniac. They have some qualities of demons. They have some qualities of divine. So what is that? And that is what is the 17th chapter, the division of faith. And then the 18th chapter is the summary of all what we will discuss. So that is how you can say that the 13.22nd verse, the beej verse or the seed verse, leads to the further chapters in the Bhagavad Gita. So that is where, because of the gunas, now we are discussing about the three modes of material nature. And also we see that in the end of 13th chapter, where the Lord speaks about Jnana Chakshu. So there in that verse, in those series of verses, in the Jnana Chakshu verses, the Lord explains that one who sees the modes that they are at work and the soul doesn't work. What it means is that at the Jnana Chakshu level, when the person has purified himself by the process of devotional service, in that stage, the person is able to see that actually I'm being influenced by the modes. And because he's able to see, he's able to influence by the mode, he doesn't degrade his mind. So because he doesn't degrade his mind, he's a jnani. He understands what are the workings of the mode. So that is where, that was the end of the 13th chapter, and from there Lord Krishna is now explaining about the three modes of material nature. So in chapter number 14, the Lord explains about these modes in further detail. And what are those details? The details are what are the modes, how do they work, how do they bind the living entity who is pure, and how these modes are destroyed by the process of bhakti. So these are the major subject matter of chapter number 14. So let us begin. 14.1 to 14.9 talks about the conditioning of material modes, and the Lord gives details to Arjuna how the modes actually condition the living entity. Before he starts describing about the modes, first of all, Lord Krishna glorifies the knowledge he is about to give to Arjuna. It is mainly to excite interest in Arjuna, that this is the knowledge that I am trying. This is the knowledge about the modes I am going to give you, and this is really very important. And he glorifies the knowledge he is about to speak by speaking first two verses. So he glorifies the pure knowledge he is about to speak. He says, first of all, he says that he is speaking about the highest knowledge. And the verse he speaks is Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Param Bhuya Pravakshami Jnananam Jnanamuttamam Yajgyatva Munaya Sarve Param Siddhim Ito Gataha. What he's saying is, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, again I shall declare to you this supreme wisdom, the best of all knowledge, knowing which all the sages have attained the supreme perfection. So he's saying, Param Bhuyah Pravakshyami. Again, I shall speak this supreme wisdom. So here the important is he's saying again. Now, what do we mean by again? Again means the Lord is trying to say that he has spoken this knowledge already before, but now he's once again speaking this supreme wisdom. And what is the nature of this supreme wisdom, which is talking again? He's saying that it is Jnana Nam, among all the knowledge, Jnanam Uttamam. This knowledge among all the other knowledge is the Uttamam, it is the best. So he's speaking these verses in this Jnana section of the Bhagavad Gita, and he's referring that he's speaking this again. Now, where the Lord has spoken this knowledge in the previous chapters. So if you recall, Lord has been speaking about modes at various chapters, but specifically he makes this mention in the 7th chapter, where he says about the material modes. All what he has been described so far is the modes actually also influence all these things, where he speaks about the 5 gross elements, 3 subtle elements, and then he speaks about the superior energy of the Lord, where he speaks about the soul. So, and then afterwards, I think in 7.12 he speaks about the 3 modes. So let me find out that verse. 7.12. 7.12, he says, know that all states of being, be they of goodness, passion, or ignorance, are manifested by my energy. So in 7.12, he has already spoken about these modes of material nature. Now he's speaking it again. And he's saying that it is best of knowledge. So what does it mean, best of knowledge? Because if he is speaking it, if he has already spoken it before, then how do we understand that this is best of knowledge? So we can understand that in the previous chapters he has spoken about many other things like karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, and so on. And in 7th chapter he has also spoken that by the process of bhakti, by surrendering to Krishna, we can overcome these modes of material nature. So that is what he is referring, that he has spoken this before, but he also at the same time he's saying that it is best of knowledge. What does it mean? It means that he has spoken about karma, jnana, bhakti, and so on, but this knowledge again he is giving the same point. He's repeating that these are the modes and you can transcend them by the process of bhakti. So whatever he has spoken about in the previous chapters like karma, jnana, bhakti, dhyana, etc., he's once again talking it about now, about the modes and being able to transcend by bhakti, and that is the best of all knowledge. So that is how we need to understand that when he's saying again and best of all knowledge. And then he says, Yajgyatva Munaya Sarve. Yajgyatva Munaya Sarve. So it is interesting where Lord Krishna is talking here about Munaya. Munaya means the Munis, the sages. He's not talking about the bhaktas. He's not talking about the devotees. He's talking about the munis, the sages. So why he's talking about the sages? Actually, the bhaktas doesn't need to know about this knowledge in great detail, because the devotees are already engaged in the surrendering process of the Lord. The devotees are already doing devotional service, which is another name of surrendering to the Lord. And sages who are actually mainly trying to understand the Lord by the process of knowledge, by process of introspection, by process of understanding about the 24 elements of the material nature, by understanding the soul, by understanding the super soul. So those munis, uh, those who are trying to understand this knowledge by the process of Jnana Yoga, then the Lord is saying that Yaj Gyatva Munaya Sarve. So all the sages attain supreme perfection by knowing this knowledge. So he's talking about those munis who are in the process of Jnana Yoga, and then by understanding this process of modes and how these modes can be overcome by the process of devotional service, by the process of bhakti, they can attain the supreme perfection. So that is how we need to understand this verse number 1, where the Lord is talking that this is the highest knowledge, this is the best knowledge he's giving in this chapter. So 14.2, again the Lord is glorifying the words, the knowledge he's about to give to Arjuna. He's saying, idam jnanam upashritya mama sadharmyam agataha sargepi nopajayante pralayena vyathanti cha. The Lord is saying that idam jnanam upashritya, by taking shelter of this knowledge. So upashritya means shelter. We will try to understand what is the meaning of shelter. And then he says, mama sadharmyam agataha, attain the same nature as mine. Mama is mine. Sadharmyam means, here the Lord is saying the same nature as mine. Agataha, he attained. Agataha means achieving, attaining. Mama sadharmyam agataha idam jnanam upashritya, by taking shelter of this knowledge. And then sarge api nopajayante. Sarge means creation, and api means also. Nopajayante, even even in this creation, it doesn't take any birth again. And then pralayena vyathanti cha, does not experience pain of death. So what he's saying is, he's glorifying this knowledge and telling that what is the benefit of this knowledge, what is the result of this knowledge. So by knowing this, all what I am going to tell you, which also I have told you briefly before, you will not take any birth, and you will not experience the pain of death. But let us look at a little specifically at some of these words that the Lord is using, and try to go a little detail on what does it mean. So here the Lord is saying idam jnanam upashritya. Here he is not saying idam mama upashritya, or my shelter. He's saying that taking shelter of my knowledge, taking shelter of this knowledge. So he's distinguishing between taking shelter of taking shelter of me versus taking shelter of my knowledge. So what does it mean? We can take shelter of Krishna, but we can also take shelter of the knowledge given by Krishna. What does it mean by taking shelter of knowledge? Taking by what make by taking shelter of knowledge, what it means is that when we take some knowledge, generally what is the effect of taking some knowledge in some people, that they become proud of taking that knowledge. However, when Lord Krishna is saying that idam jnanam upashritya, by taking shelter of this knowledge, what does it mean is that we should not become proud after taking this knowledge. Rather, we should develop humility by taking of this knowledge. So sometimes when we crack some difficult problem, we try to think that we have cracked this problem. I have done this, and this is because of my intelligence I am able to do this. So no, that is not the mood that should manifest after understanding this knowledge. The mood that should manifest, that should appear in our heart, in our mind after taking this knowledge is a mood of humility, not the pride. And there is a nice analogy that is given, which is a crown versus umbrella analogy. So sometimes people take knowledge, they take big degrees, they become very learned, and they use that learning, or they use that knowledge as a crown, as a means, as an ornament to show off to people that I am so and so, I'm PhD, I am doctor of so and so, I am so and so, like that. So knowledge being used as a crown, uh, but knowledge being used as a crown does not give a shelter which an umbrella can give when there is a storm, when there is a rain, when there is a upheaval in the environment. So umbrella, when you hold in your hand, it can give you shelter from sunlight, it can give you shelter from rains, and so on. But crown cannot give shelter. So that is why Lord is saying here, idam jnanam upashritya. By taking shelter of this knowledge, mama sadharmyam agataha. Mama sadharmyam agataha means attain the same nature as mine. Because what is sadharmyam? What is he's talking about sadharmyam? Sadharmyam, the Lord is actually hinting here, is bhakti. So what are the main activities of bhakti? The main activities of bhakti is Shravanam and Kirtanam. We hear about the glories of the Lord. We chant the holy name of the Lord. And what happens by doing this? We become godly. We develop the qualities of the Lord. So that is what he's saying, mam sadharmyam agataha. By taking to this dharmyam, by taking to this my dharma means the devotional process, the bhakti process, you also will become like me. You will also become godly like me. He's not saying you will become God like me, but godly like me. Godly like me means the Lord has wonderful qualities. So we will also develop the same qualities. So Srila Prabhupada used to give this analogy of an iron rod. He would say that without association, without taking to the process of devotional service, we are just like a raw iron rod. But when we keep this iron rod into fire, the after some time this iron also becomes like a fire. It no longer remains an iron, it also becomes red hot. So that is what the analogy means, that when a raw person who doesn't have connection with the devotional process, when he comes in the connection with the devotees, comes in the association of the devotees, hears about the Lord, hears about the wonderful qualities of the Lord, he also acquires those godly qualities. And that is what the Lord is saying here is mama sadharmyam agataha. He also become same nature as mine. And what is the result of becoming same nature as mine? He says sarge api nopajayante. Sarga means, in Srimad Bhagavatam there are mention of sarga and visarga. So sarga means creation, visarga means secondary creation. Sarga, creation, means at the time of creation, when the Lord creates the universes and everything else that we see around us, it is known as sarga. So he's saying that because you will achieve the same nature as mine, you will come to me. So what will happen is that when I will create, when I will do the creation, sarge api, you will not have to take birth again. You will not have to take birth again in the universal creation. And pralayena vyathanti cha, pralayena vyathanti cha, and then you will not be disturbed at the time of death, because if you will not take birth, why will you will have to disturb at the time of death? So that is the result of attaining this knowledge. So Lord actually is glorifying this knowledge to Arjuna to excite his interest. And we see that Lord has glorified the knowledge in various chapters, like at the beginning of chapter number 7, at the beginning of chapter number 9, at the beginning of chapter number 10. When he was about to speak some knowledge, he glorified it. He mentioned the benefits of acquiring that knowledge. So like that, similarly, in 14th chapter also, he has done glorification of the knowledge he's about to speak in first two verses. Let us move. Now in verse number 3 and verse number 4, the Lord speaks about how the jiva comes in contact with the prakriti. Now we can remember from the 13th chapter, Purushaha prakrti sthohi bhungte prakrtir jan gunan. Like Purusha prakrti sthohi, the Purusha, the jiva, is placed in the material nature. Bhungte prakrtir jan gunas, and that's where we understood that why he is placed in the material nature, because he wants to enjoy the material nature. Bhungte prakrtir jan gunan. He wants to enjoy the prakriti, and that's why he's placed in the prakriti. Now here in the third verse, the Lord gives more detail how the jiva comes in contact with the material nature. And here what he says, mama yonir mahad brahma tasmin garbham dadhamyaham sambhava sarva bhutanam tato bhavati bharata. He's saying the total material substance called Brahman is the source of birth. And it is that Brahman that I impregnate, making possible the births of all living beings, O son of Bharata. So here, the thrust of this verse is in the 13.22 verse, we only understood that Purusha Prakriti Sthohi, the living entity is placed in the Prakriti. But we don't know who does this. So here the detail, the additional detail that we learn here is that it is actually the Lord who impregnates the Prakriti. So here he's saying, Mama yonir mahad brahma tasmin garbham dadhamyaham. Tasmin garbham. So yonir mahad brahma. Yonir mahad brahma means yonir mahad means actually the womb. And who he impregnates, the Lord impregnates whom? Lord impregnates the Prakriti. So he's saying the womb of Prakriti is actually impregnated by me. Mama yoni. Mama means the Prakriti also belongs to the Lord. So everything in this creation belongs to the Lord. So that's why he's saying mama yonir mahad brahmam tasmin garbham dadhamyaham. It is the Lord who impregnates the womb of the material nature. So you see here in the picture where Prakriti is being shown uh, folding with folded hands in front of the Lord is Mahavishnu, and Mahavishnu is actually glancing at the Prakriti. And what happens when the Lord glances at the Prakriti? All the souls that are that were absorbed in the body of or that were taken back in the body of the Lord Mahavishnu at the time of destruction, at the time of annihilation, the same souls actually come out from the body of the Mahavishnu, and when the Lord glances the Prakriti, the Lord impregnates the Prakriti with those souls. So that's what it means when it says Mama Yonir Mahad Brahma Tasmin Garbham Dadhamyaham. And what happens with that? Sambhava Sarva Bhutanam Tato Bhavati Bharata. And then making possible the birth of all living beings, O son of Bharata. So that is what happens. That is how the material nature gets created. That is how the living entity gets the body. And here the Lord is using the word Yonir Mahat Brahma. So Mahat Brahma is same as Mahat Tattva. Mahat Tattva. And what is Mahat Tattva? In the previous chapter, we studied about the 24 elements of Prakriti. 24 elements where we studied about 5 gross elements, we studied about 5 sense objects, we studied about 5 senses, we studied about 5 working senses, then the 3 subtle senses, and then the gross aggregate, which is the pradhana. So we studied about the 24 elements. So this Mahat Tattva, these 24 elements are together called as one technical term by Mahat Tattva. It is also known as Mahat Brahmam, Mahat Brahma. Mama Yonir Mahat Brahma. So Mahat Brahma is the material Prakriti, and Yoni is the womb of this Prakriti. So what the Lord is saying is, Lord injects the souls and impregnates the material nature. How he does it? He glances at the material nature. He simply desires and glances at the material nature. And the living entities, they are impregnated in the material nature. So the important message of this verse is that actually it is the Lord who is the cause for the jiva to come into this material nature. It is because of the Lord who makes this possible, that the jiva takes a form of a body, and he does it through his material nature. Mahat Mama Yonir Mahat Brahma. And here in the purport, Srila Prabhupada gives an analogy of a scorpion taking birth or laying eggs in the piles of rice. So Srila Prabhupada is saying, sometimes people say that the living entity comes from matter. Life comes from matter. Here he's trying to refute that point, that life actually doesn't come from matter. Life comes from life. And ultimately, life comes from the supreme life, which is the Supreme Lord. So that is the ultimate source from where the life comes. And here he's giving the analogy of, to prove this point, he's giving this analogy, or to explain this point, he's giving an analogy of a scorpion laying eggs in a pile of rice. So what happens is, sometimes a scorpion lays his eggs in pile of rice and goes away. And after some time, there are baby scorpions coming out from the piles of rice. So sometimes people think that actually this scorpion has come out from the rice. So that is what the Prabhupada is trying to say, that it is not that the life is coming from material nature. It is actually the Lord who is the ultimate source and ultimate cause for the life comes in this material nature. So because the scorpion is coming from rice doesn't mean that it is coming from the rice. It is actually the scorpion mother or scorpion parents who have laid the eggs on the rice, in the rice, the scorpion has come. So we don't see that, but doesn't mean that it doesn't happen like that. So that is in the third verse, the Lord is trying to explain that point. That it is because of me the prakriti is impregnated and the life manifests in this material nature. Now the fourth verse further progresses this point which we studied in the third verse. Here the Srila Prabhupada, Lord Krishna mentions, Sarvayonishu Kaunteya Murtaya Sambhavanti Yah Tasam Brahma Mahadyonir Aham Bija Pradah Pita. So once again he has reinforced the point that I am the father and Prakriti is the mother. I am actually the seed giving father, where he's saying Aham Bija Pradah Pita. And then he says Sarvayonishu Kaunteya, all species of life. And all species of life at the start of creation. Murtayah Sambhavantiyah are made possible by birth. Murtayah means they manifest. Sambhavanti means possible. Their manifestation in the material nature become possible in this material nature. Tasam Brahma Mahad Yonir. Tasam Brahma Mahad Yonir. Aham Bija Pradapita. So the Lord is saying is that actually I am the seed-giving father. The Lord is saying actually I as Mahavishnu. So he is not directly as Lord Krishna, because Lord Krishna directly doesn't get involved in the process of creation. He creates through his expansion Mahavishnu, who further expands as Garbhodakshai Vishnu, from whose navel Lord Brahma takes birth on the lotus, and then Shirodakshai Vishnu, who enters into the heart and the atoms and every other living being. So that's how the creation takes place. So here the Lord further clarifies this point, that actually Sarva Yonishu Kaunteya, all species of life at the start of creation, everything, because all the souls that get absorbed in the body of Mahavishnu, they manifest once again at the time of creation. So all species of life, Sarva Yonishu Kaunteya, Murtaya Sambhavantiya, are made possible by birth in this material nature. Tasam Brahma Mahad Yonit, and I am the seed giving father. So I am the father and Prakriti is the mother. Yeah, we will move now to the fifth verse. In the from fifth verse to the ninth verse, the theme that goes on is how the modes bind the pure jiva. The jiva, the soul by nature is pure, but when it comes in the contact of the three modes, the gunas, the sattva, rajas, and tamas, how does the mode bind him? How does the mode bind the pure jiva? It says the jiva's bondage is under the spell of modes. In the 14.5th verse, the theme is how the modes bind the jiva. Here he says, now we are talking about the three modes, sattva, rajas, and tamas. Sattvam rajastama iti gunaha prakriti sambhavaha nibadnanti mahabaho dehe dehinam abhyayam. Now here the word used is nibadnanti. I think in the past, one of the devotees in the group asked me what is meant by conditioned. Conditioned actually means bound, nibadnanti. Huh? Here he's saying is they bind the jiva in the material body. And from where these modes comes, these are three in number: sattvam, rajas, and tama. Sattvam, rajas, tama iti, goodness, passion, and ignorance. These are produced from material nature. Gunaha prakriti sambhava. Gunaha prakriti sambhava. So these modes actually come from the material nature. Now, what are these modes? They are coming from material nature, but are these things? Are these material things? Are these gross things, subtle things? What are these? So the next slide actually describes about what are these modes. So these modes, as we have already discussed, and the title of the chapter is, these are modes of material nature. So these modes are not spiritual. They are not spiritual. They are material. They are bhautik. Hmm. But what are these? How do we understand them? They are not gross. Gross, for example, like I see this table or I see this book which I can hold. So these are some gross things, or maybe air, water, fire. Sometimes, so these are a little bit gross. We can see them, we can perceive them, and understand them like that. But the modes are actually subtle things. These are not gross things. These are very subtle things. And how to make a definition of a mode? These are actually subtle forces that shape the interaction between the gross matter, which is the body, and the consciousness, which is the soul. So the subtle forces that shape the interaction between the gross matter and the consciousness. So these are subtle forces. And how do we understand them practically? Srila Prabhupada in the purport explained this: because living entities have different kinds of bodies in terms of different aspects of nature, they are induced to act according to that nature. They are induced to act according to that nature. This is the cause of the varieties of happiness and distress. Now, what does it mean? They are induced to act according to that nature. Induced means, for example, you can consider them something like program. So different living entities, they get their bodies according to their past karma. So if you have done good deeds, you get a better body in terms of the modes. Modes means you'll get more of sattva compared to other gunas like rajas and tamas. You will have more of sattva guna compared to rajo guna and tamo guna. However, if you are not done so nice deeds in the past life, you probably are bound to get more of rajas or more of tamas. Or if you have been acting, or if we have been acting in an animalistic way in our lives, no consideration of dharma or no consideration of good or bad, then we will get somebody where the tamogun is much more. The tama or the darkness, mode of ignorance, will be much more in prominence. So because of a certain kind of body that we get, the body or the modes actually influence the consciousness in that particular way. That is what it is saying here, is they are induced to act according to that nature. So if you have a more rajasic body, then you will be bound to act more in a rajasic way. If you have a tamasic body, more of a tamasic body, it is not that purely we will get a tamasic body. It is not like that. It's a mixture. The sattva, rajas, and tamas, they are mixed in varying proportions. So if you have a tamasic body, you will probably induce to act in a particular way. So that is what it is saying, that these are subtle forces that shape the interaction between gross matter and consciousness. So gross matter is body, consciousness is soul. So soul chooses. So for example, if a person has a more of a rajasic body, and in that case the body will make an influence on the soul which is more rajasic in nature, but then the soul will choose or will be bound or in some way will be forced, it will be proposed to choose in a certain way, behave in a certain way. That is what the modes means. And that is what in the previous verse what is being mentioned here is that these modes are created, they are produced from material nature, right? So these are subtle forces produced from material nature, and they shape the interaction between the gross matter and the consciousness. Okay, let us move to the next verse, which is now the verse number 6 will talk about Sattva Guna, 7 will talk about Rajoguna, and 8 will talk about Tamoguna. Let us see what does it mean. Bondage by Sattva Guna. Tatra Sattvam Nirmalatvat Prakashakam Anamayam Sukha Sangena Badnati Jnana Sangena Chanagha. So he's saying, Lord Krishna is saying, Tatra Sattvam Nirmalatvat. So he's saying Nirmal means pure. Nirmal means clean, without any spots, uh, without any dirt or without any spots like that. So Tatra Sattvam Nirmalatvat. So the Sattvam is actually the purest of all the modes. And what are the qualities of this mode? It is Prakashakam Anamayam. Prakashakam means it is illuminating. Illuminating means it gives knowledge. What is the benefit of getting this knowledge? The person is able to make good choices, but the person is able to distinguish between what is right, what is wrong, what is good for him, what is not so good for him. And that's what the Prakashakam means. It is illuminating. And then Anamayam, because he's able to make good choices, he is able to free oneself from the sins and distress. This is what it means is Anamayam. Sukha Sangena Badnati. Sukha Sangena Badnati. Now here again he's talking about Badnati. Badnati means bound. So even Sattvam, which is pure, which is illuminating, which frees from sins and distress, even this is Badnati. Even this conditions, even this binds the living entity with some kind of happiness. It is conditioned by the sense of happiness and knowledge. Now we will try to understand a little bit more about sense of happiness and knowledge. And if you can see, I have shown the picture of Einstein, which is a scientist, a very learned person, very intelligent person. So who is a scientist, and why I've shown the picture, it will be clear when I will take the next slide. The next slide is a purport by Srila Prabhupada. And in this purport, Srila Prabhupada makes a lot of very good points. And let us read it peacefully and carefully. Here he's saying, Srila Prabhupada is saying, the difficulty here is that when a living entity is situated in the mode of goodness, he becomes conditioned to feel that he is advanced in knowledge and better than others. That's what the problem with the mode of goodness. He is advanced in knowledge and he is better than others. So if you go back to the 13 point or the 14.2 verse, where the Lord is saying, Upashritya, you have to take shelter of this knowledge. And what does it mean by shelter of knowledge? You should not become proud. So in a subtle way, in a very delicate way, the people who are in mode of goodness, they think that they know better than others, they are superior to others, and that feeling of superiority and that feeling of advancement of knowledge, that conditions them to goodness. And in this way he becomes conditioned. The best examples are the scientist and the philosopher, because the scientists and philosophers, they are very intelligent people, they are very knowledgeable people. They actually can understand the knowledge which is much more subtler, which is very difficult to comprehend for common people. They can analyze deeply, they can understand things very deeply, they can evaluate things in a very more clear cut way, in a much more deeper way, and hence they are able to solve better problems. They are better able to solve problems, and then because they are better able to solve these things, they are better placed in the society also. And because they are better placed in the society, they are able to make good decisions, what is good, what is bad. They kind of lead a relatively much happier life, much peaceful life. And but in this way, they think that I am actually able to do it because of my capabilities, because of my knowledge, I am able to do like that. So that is why they become, each is very proud of his knowledge, and because they generally improve their living conditions, they feel a sort of material happiness. This sense of advanced happiness in conditioned life makes them bound by the mode of goodness of material. So this is mainly the binding effect of mode of sattva guna. As such, they are attracted towards working in the mode of goodness, and as long as they have an attraction for working in that way, they have to take some type of body in the modes of nature. So again and again, they continue to get this body of scientists, poets, philosophers, literary people, intelligent people, intellectuals, like that. That is what the mode of goodness does. Again and again, they take birth in the same kind of bodies, or maybe even superior bodies, as you will see in the chapter later. Now we'll come to mode of passion. Bondage by Rajoguna. Rajo ragatmakam vidhi trishna sanga samudbhavam tannibadnanti kaunteya karma sangena dehinam. What the Lord is saying is, Lord is saying, the mode of passion is born of unlimited desires and longings, O son of Kunti, and because of this, the embodied living entity is bound to material fruitive actions. So, unlimited desires and longings, and bound to material fruitive actions. So, here, Rajo Ragatmakam Vidhi. Rag means attachment. Rajo Ragatmakam Vidhi. Passion is born out of attachment for the attained. And then Trishna Sangha Samudbhavam, longing for unattained. What does it mean, attachment for the attained? So, if we have acquired, if a person in a mode of passion has acquired a lot of wealth, he becomes attached to it. He becomes greedy about it. I will not give it to anybody. He becomes attached. And then what he does not have, and Trishna Sangha Samudbhavam. Trishna means longing for something which he doesn't have. So Trishna Sangha Samudbhavan, longing for unattained. Unattained means which he doesn't have. So he longs for something which he doesn't have, longing for unattained. And then Tan Nibadnanti Kaunteya, Tan Nibadnati Kaunteya, this bounds Karma Sangena Dehinam. So he is bound to material fruitive actions. Material fruitive actions means he will act only if there is some fruit for his own selfish purposes involved somewhere. So he will not act out of selflessness. These people, the mode of Rajoguna actually induce selfishness in a person. Say, I will do something only if there is some benefit for me in this particular action. That is what mode of passion or Rajoguna does. Let us, so I have shown here picture where a lady is walking, and a person and a man is looking at that lady and developing some attraction towards the person, and here we see that the man and the woman, they come close to each other, they get attracted towards each other. And why I'm saying so, it will be clear in the in the purport that Srila Prabhupada presents for this particular verse. He's saying, Srila Prabhupada is saying, the mode of passion is characterized by attraction between man and woman. Woman has attraction for man, and man has attraction for woman. This is called the mode of passion. And when the mode of passion is increased, one develops the hankering for material enjoyment. Hankering for material enjoyment means one wants to enjoy more and more. He wants to enjoy sense gratification. He wants to enjoy senses. He wants to enjoy family life. For sense gratification, a man in the mode of passion wants some honor in society. He wants to have a happy family. He wants to have nice children, wife, and house. So that is why mode of passion actually is characterized deeply by attraction between man and woman. Because there is an attraction between man and woman, everything follows through. The family life starts. When the family life starts, demands increases. Demands increases, he goes to work. He goes to work, he works very hard. He works very hard. He develops some attraction for the money that he acquires. When he has some money, he doesn't want to get away from that money. And like that, he wants an honor in the society. He will have children. He wants his children now to grow big, and like that. So that's how Actually, the mode of passion starts typically by attraction between man and woman. And then Srila Prabhupada again says, modern civilization is considered to be advanced in the standard of mode of passion. Formerly, the advanced condition was considered to be in the mode of goodness. Now, this is the characteristic of Kali Yuga. It is the characteristic of modern society. In the modern society, if a person has more wealth, even though he may not have a very good character, actually he will be more honored. So you can see the role models in the present society, they are not somebody who are saints. They are somebody who are like film stars, who are very big businessmen, and who are actually successful from the criteria of materialistic point of view. If a person has a very strong character, very good character, generally in the society today, they are not actually very much considered to be very honorable like that. So for example, if a president of America have a illicit affair with her secretary, but he keeps the economy well, he keeps the business running well, economy well, then people might say, how does it matter to me? He is having a personal affair with his secretary, I don't care. The economy is running fine, the businesses are running good, so that's fine. So you will find these kind of people a lot in the society. So in the past, people, when they would take bribes, people would say that no, this is not a good person, he actually takes bribe. Now the standard has gone down to the level where the people might say, uh, although he takes bribe, but he gets our work done, so no problem, let him take bribe. So that is how you can see how you can observe the standard or the moral standard of the society by the cover page of the magazines, by the posters that are there on the streets that you will watch, by the language people are using when they are talking, and so on. So you can estimate the level of morality or the level of consciousness by some of these examples, and that is what Srila Prabhupada is mentioning here, that the modern civilization is considered to be advanced in the standard of mode of passion. Let us look what is tamoguna. Tamasva ajnanajam viddhi mohanam sarvadehinam pramadalasya nidrabhis tannibadnati bharata. Now, mode of ignorance, which is tamoguna, it is born out of ignorance. It is ignorance means in this mode, the person doesn't have the vivek or the intelligence to decide between what is right and what is wrong. And because he doesn't have the intelligence to decide between what is right and what is wrong, he keeps on degrading in his life. He keeps on degrading in his life like that. And this is the delusion of living entities. And that is why they are deluded. They are always deluded. They are not clear in their understanding of what is good, what is right, what is bad, what is wrong, like that. And these are bounded by mohanam sarvadehinam, delusion, and then pramad. Pramad means madness. Madness, what does it? Madness doesn't mean that they are kind of mad people living in a asylum or in a pagal khana. No, that is not the madness. Madness means that they continue to degrade themselves in their life. For example, if a person starts drinking, and because he's not able to decide what is right and what is wrong, he continues to drink, become addicted. Now he becomes addicted. After becoming addicted, he needs more alcohol, but he doesn't have money. Now he takes loan from people, he takes credit, he takes money on credit from people, and then he drinks. Soon he becomes bankrupt, soon he becomes miserable, soon he becomes degraded and comes to the road. He becomes a his condition becomes really bad. So this is something like madness, where he doesn't understand what is right and what is wrong. It is also meaning laziness. It also means sleep. Laziness means although he is capable, he is skillful enough to do some activity, do some employment, but out of laziness, out of lethargy, he will not actually go to employment, go to work. That is what it means. What is laziness? and that is what sleep. So these kind of people actually sleep more and more, generally maybe 10 hours, 12 hours, generally 7 8 hours, 6 hours, 6 7 hours sleep is good enough for giving rest to the body. Maybe different people may have a little bit plus minus 1 2 hours here and there, but generally 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours should be good enough for taking rest. But these people continue to sleep for 10 hours, 12 hours, 13 14 hours. So this is an indication of tamoguna. Srila Prabhupada also gives a wonderful purport about tamoguna. He's saying everyone under the spell of the mode of ignorance becomes mad, and a madman cannot understand what is what. Instead of making advancement, one becomes degraded. Hmm. And then Prabhupada further says in the purport, such people are very lazy. When they are invited to associate for spiritual understanding, they are not much interested because they don't want to know what is good and what is right. They don't care about it. They are not even active like the man who is controlled by the mode of passion. So mode of passion, actually people are active. They are hardworking people. They'll want to, why they want to work hard? Because they want to acquire more and more. But here Prabhupada is saying they are not even active like the man who is controlled by the mode of passion. Thus, another symptom of one embedded in the mode of ignorance is that he sleeps more than is required. 6 hours of sleep is sufficient, but a man in the mode of ignorance sleeps at least 10 or 12 hours a day. Such a man appears to be always dejected and is addicted to intoxicants and sleeping. So this is mode of ignorance, tamoguna. They are always dejected. What I am going to supposed to do? Life is a big failure. We can't do anything. Addicted to intoxicants, they will try to lead to intoxicants uh, just to suppress these feeling of dejection. So momentarily gaining some kind of happiness by the way of intoxicants. So that is how these people behave. So that is the presence of mode of ignorance. And in the 9th verse, Lord Shri Krishna summarizes the whole story of goodness, passion, and ignorance. He says that goodness conditions to happiness, passion conditions to fruitive action, and ignorance conditions to madness. So he's summarizing the whole thing. Goodness condition to happiness. Here I have shown in the picture nature. So the people in mode of goodness actually like nature. They want to go to close to nature because that gives them the feeling of happiness. Passion conditions to fruitive action. Fruitive condition I have depicted by various buildings, office buildings, big buildings, which is showing about the very labor intensive nature of people who are passionate. They want to create, and they want to really create and enjoy that creation for themselves. That is what the mode of passion is. And here ignorance conditions to madness. So you can see the various liquor bottles here, bottle of alcohols, where people take to these kind of intoxicants and try to suppress their feeling of dejection. Now, another way to understand this is when people are in mode of goodness, they are both contemplative and they are both active. Contemplative means they think wisely, and after thinking wisely, they take action. In mode of passion, people don't think much. In mode of passion, people don't think much. People take knee-jerk reaction kind of actions. They take quick actions without much thinking, and then and people in mode of ignorance, they are neither contemplative and neither they take any action. So this is how you can kind of summarize the people who are in mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Now let us move to our next section. In the next section, we will understand how the modes compete with each other. So in the previous section, from verse number 5th to verse number 9, we have understood the static nature of the mode of goodness. So if a particular mode of various modes, if a particular mode is there, what is the quality associated with that mode? But in the from verse number 10th till verse number 13, we will understand that these modes actually compete each other. So the Lord is saying here is that it is not that these modes remain static, they actually are dynamic. They keep on changing, they fight with among each other, they compete with each other. So the mode of goodness competes with mode of passion and mode of ignorance. Try to beat mode of passion and mode of ignorance. Mode of ignorance try to beat mode of goodness and mode of ignorance, and like so. So there is the competition which is going on these modes always. It says रजस्तमश्च भू रजस्तमश्च भीभूय सत्वं भवति भारत रजः सत्वं तमश्चैव तमः सत्वं रजस्तथा. Sometimes the mode of goodness become prominent, defeating passion and ignorance. Sometimes mode of passion defeats goodness and ignorance, and at other times ignorance defeats goodness and passion. In this way, there is always competition for supremacy, O son of Bharata. So there is a competition. Now, what does it mean for us? It means that in this competition, if the soul, like a jiva or the living entity, makes a certain kind of choices, then by developing, practicing, and choosing those choices again and again, we can actually develop mode of goodness. So the choices that we make actually develop that particular kind of mode. If we make choices which are in mode of goodness, we develop more goodness. If we make choices which are in mode of passion, develop more passion. Similarly, ignorance. Now it is something like, what does it mean by dynamic? It is like we are walking on a road, and every time, every moment in our life when we are walking on a road, we have to make a choice. Every time there are three choices in front of us. It's like a fork. It's like a three-way, which the road which we are walking, it is going in three directions. One is goodness, one is passion, one is ignorance. So it is like life is like a road splitting in three ways every moment. What does it mean? Every moment we are making choices, and then sometimes we make a choice, we go on mode of passion. We take a road which is mode of passion. Again, when we are walking on this road which is mode of passion, again this road splits into three. 1, 2, 3. Goodness, passion, ignorance. Again, there is a choice given to us. Can we choose goodness? Can we choose passion? Can we choose ignorance? Like that. So this is how the life goes on, and the choices that we make actually help enhance, help strengthen that particular kind of a mode. For example, if we are chanting, Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, doing our sadhana in the morning, and we feel a little sleepy, so we should understand that mode of ignorance is actually now becoming a little bit stronger on us. What we can do at that moment of time, we can actually try to make a choice now. Should we continue to sit and chant, or can we stand and chant? Because when we stand and chant, the sleep will go away. Or we can walk, we can take a walk and chant, and that's how the sleep might go away. So this is how we should understand that how these modes are always in competition, and by making small choices, by calibrating our choices towards mode of goodness, we can actually continue to strengthen mode of goodness more and more, and improve our life, which is because mode of goodness is actually that brings happiness in our life. Also, we should understand that how these modes appear at certain time and disappear at certain time. It is mainly because our karmas from the previous lives are actually manifesting or getting destroyed. So if our bad karma is destroyed, maybe the sattva will become a little more prominent. If a bad karma becomes manifest, maybe the rajoguna actually might become a little more prominent. So this is mainly because why these appear and disappear, and why are they in competition. They are actually representative of our previous good or bad karmas in our previous life. So here you can see in this picture I have shown goodness, passion, and ignorance. Goodness is something like a learned, educated man, or maybe a scientist, a philosopher, like that. And here you can see a man and woman, the attraction between the man and woman. This is depicted as passion, and here using alcohol, and this is actually the mode of ignorance. Srila Prabhupada further clarifies here, although there are these three modes of material nature, if one is determined, he can be blessed by the mode of goodness, and by transcending the mode of goodness, he can be situated in pure goodness. Now this is very important. What is pure goodness? We understand ignorance, we understand passion, and we understand goodness. But what is pure goodness? Which is called as Vasudev state, a state in which one can understand the signs of God. Now, what is pure goodness? What is the difference between pure goodness and goodness? So, what we understood about mode of goodness, Sattva Guna, the mode of goodness, Sattva Guna, induces us a feeling of happiness, a feeling of superiority, a feeling of superiority. But in mode of pure goodness, that feeling of superiority is not there. What does it mean? Feeling of superiority is not there. The person who is in pure goodness, uh, who understand what is pure goodness, actually doesn't take credit of his accomplishments himself. What does he do? The consciousness of such a person is that whatever I am in my life at the present moment, it is actually because of the mercy of the Lord. It is only because the Lord is very kind to me, I am at this position in my life. So this is how a person, by developing this kind of consciousness, can actually transcend from goodness to pure goodness, to Vasudeva state. So this is what pure goodness means. And how you can develop pure goodness? Very simple, by adopting the process of devotional service. Because what is devotional service? Devotional service is practice of that Lord is the master, I am the servant. This is actually getting you deprived of the controllership mentality, that I am the controller, I am the Ishvara, I am actually the accomplisher. No, it is not like that. You cannot, the jiva cannot accomplish unless and until there is the sanction of the Lord. So unless and until there is a sanction of the Lord, the jiva cannot accomplish anything in this world. So developing this dasa, developing this feeling of servant,
ಏನು ಮಗೇಶ್ ಗುಡ್ ಗರ್ಲ್
developing this feeling of servanthood is actually same as developing pure goodness. So this can happen by regular and nice practice of devotional service. Now from 11th to 13th, the Lord is giving the same examples as he has given in verse number 6, verse number 7, and verse number 8. In verse number 6, he talked about goodness. In verse number 11, also he talks about goodness. In verse number 7, he talks about passion. In verse number 12, he once again talks about passion. And similarly, in verse number 8 and verse number 13, he talks about mode of ignorance, tamoguna. So he's kind of repeating. He's saying how to recognize the mode of goodness. When goodness increases, what happens? The Lord is saying all the 9 gates are illuminated by knowledge and happiness. And then he says he can see, hear, taste things in the right position. So this is we already discussed. So in the mode of goodness, whatever person does, whatever has to see, he will choose, he will make a right choice what to see. He will make a right choice what to hear. He will make a right choice what to eat. So that is how the mode of goodness can be. When the mode of goodness increases, the knowledge to differentiate, to discriminate between the right and wrong increases. The Vivek Buddhi increases. And then it also mentions that one becomes cleansed from inside and outside. So the sinful tendencies are suppressed, and the more noble tendencies are manifested in a person when the mode of goodness increases. But when the passion increases, passion is represented by greed. Fruitive activity means I will do any activity unless and until there is some self-interest for me. That is what it means, fruitive activity. Intense endeavor, because these people are very fond of acquiring things. They do a lot of endeavor, they do a lot of hard work to acquire those, and these are uncontrollable desires. So sometimes these people succumb to lusty desires, uncontrollable desires and hankering. So generally these people, you can call them ye dil mange more. So they are always, their motto or their tagline in their life is Ye Dil Mange More. Now you can see this Ye Dil Mange More ad also runs for TV commercials, and people actually really pick up this tagline because they identify with their modes. So they really pick this up. Ye Dil Mange More. And then passionate person is never satisfied with the position he already acquired. So now you can rate yourself whether I am in goodness, passion, or ignorance. So these are the KPIs. These are the key performance indicators of various modes that the Lord is highlighting in chapter number 14 from verse number 11, 12, and 13. Similarly, a person in mode of ignorance, when the mode of ignorance increases, what happens? Darkness, inertia. Inertia means laziness, madness, and illusion. Illusion means bhramit hona. Bhramit means not able to decide between what is good and what is right, what is bad for me. Like you can remember Arjuna's position. Moha, illusion. He was mohit by looking at his grandfather Bhishma and his teacher Drona. He was not able to decide what is good and what is right for me, what is bad and what is good and what is bad for me. So that was a mode of ignorance actually taking over on a person who is as royal, as learned, and as Arjuna. So that is what are the symptoms of mode of ignorance. These people don't follow any regulative principles because they are not interested in spiritual life, and they make no endeavor to work although they may have a capacity. So this is how the Lord is saying that these modes are very dynamic. They keep on changing, they keep on going up and down. Their levels can go up and down. And how to recognize these modes? There are certain symptoms. If they increase more in your consciousness at a particular moment of time in your life, you can recognize which mode is actually troubling you. So this is what we would like to study in the first part of this 14th chapter. And I hope philosophically not very different, because it's a wonderful psychological presentation of the modes. It's actually very close to psychology in medical terms, and the Lord is giving you a lot of examples by way you can recognize your particular psychology. And then in the end of the 14th chapter, he will tell you how to manage this psychology for your betterment, for the good of yourself. So that is all for today, and thank you for your patient listening. All glories to Srimad Bhagavad Gita, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Now it's time for any discussion, takeaway points from yourself, and any comments that you may like to make. Thank you very much.
I have a question.
Yes, Mataji.
My question is, like you said, like whatever we do in this life, and according to that, according to our karmas, we will get a different life next birth, whether good, bad, tamas, tatvik, whatever.
Yeah.
Right? According to our karmas.
Yeah.
Now, what happens when we are inflicting something on somebody? Like maybe I'm nasty to, say, for example, a beggar or somebody, or my servant who is not listening to the way I tell her to do or him to do. And so that is that person's karma for him to get fired by me or whatever that is. So that means that person gets that karma, but then I also am I not creating karma for my next birth?
Okay, so I think your question is mainly that by my dealings with others, how can I improve my situation and the other person's situation, or how does it affect the other person's situation? Correct?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Okay. Now, Lord Krishna actually mentions about something like this in 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where he differentiates between a person who is situated in a more selfless situation. He's a more selfless person, and the second person is not so selfless. He's probably selfish. He's more interested in acquiring material things and so on. So Lord Krishna in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita mentions that a person who is selfless should not disturb the mentality of the person who is selfish. And he's then saying that he should actually lead these kind of people by his own example or by her own example, or maybe they may like to lead a person who is a little more in an unfortunate situation or in a more bound by lower modes. Such a person should actually try to motivate a person rather than directly confronting them by changing their way of life, by changing their thinking, by changing their philosophy, the way they act, the way they do things. Rather by leading them by their own example, by maybe giving them some knowledge in a way that doesn't hurt them, that doesn't confront with them, or by maybe uh, like that, maybe by their own example, by giving them knowledge, by maybe praying for them, or by maybe engaging them tactfully, politely in some activities which can lift their consciousness. So that's how, if a person who is situated in a higher consciousness deals with a person in a lower consciousness, it benefits both. It benefits the person who is in the higher consciousness, he gets purified even more. And the person who is a lower consciousness, he actually feels inspired by the other person to come to a higher consciousness. So that is how you can deal with the other person, which will improve not only your karmic bank account, but also will help the other person to feel motivated and lead to a similar life.
Okay, I understood. Today I come for the class, so I understand what you're telling us, and probably we are conscious of how we behave and how we react to situations.
Mm-hmm.
But there may be some people who don't come to not some people, there are many people who don't come to the class.
Yeah.
They will not be able to get. So their mode of thing is, only if I score, only if I do this, is that person going to benefit by me correcting him. The thought process is, if I scold him only, he will understand. I'm doing it for that person's good. Then how does the karmic thing work?
Yeah, see, when we are using something like techniques like scolding, or maybe using some harsh statements, or maybe using some strong statements, these are double-edged swords. Sometimes they may backfire also. And see, ultimately, the way we speak or the way we correct people, the ultimate purpose is for their benefit. So it is not that we should not be speaking something which is untruthful, but we should be speaking to those people truth in a way which is for their benefit and which pleases them. So these are the two criteria which we should always keep in our mind. And what I will also suggest is people who are in mode of goodness actually are good in this craft of how to present things in a way which doesn't hurt, but also get the message across, even if the message is unpalatable. If it is not very pleasing in one way, the way you present the message, it can actually elevate the person and not break the person. So that's how we can. It is about doing our dealings in a correct way, or in an intelligent way, or in a mode of goodness that will actually benefit the people.
This diplomacy will work if I'm doing the class. If I have not done the class, then not about me. Somebody who has not done the class, that diplomacy will not come, right? So
No,
that
no.
means, are they creating their karmic field?
Yeah. If they are ignorant about all these things, then certainly they are creating a bad karma for them. Yes.
Yeah, even if it means that they're correcting somebody else so that they benefit.
Yeah. I mean, that is certainly. I mean, if they are not really dealing with others in a proper way, certainly they are creating bad karma for themselves.
Can I add something, Prabhuji, here in this?
Yes, Vasudevan Prabhu, please.
Shobha Mataji, I just want to say, so when we are firing somebody or when we are speaking from a position of authority, we are operating from Rajoguna. And like Krishna is saying, when you are operating from Rajoguna, you will get whatever you do, that karmic account will go only Rajoguna. And see, the question is, what is Sattva-guna? Sattva-guna is, we are saying, we operate from a position of calmness, analytical thinking. So this Rajoguna is passion. So you are getting irritated by somebody, you fire him, you shout him. But otherwise, if you are a little contemplative, if you are little, it doesn't even, somebody doesn't have to go to a Gita class. If you are a little contemplative, then he will take to more constructive criticism, which helps him improve. Which is what Prabhuji was trying to say. So even if as a layman, whether are we taking just a knee-jerk reaction which is in Rajoguna, or how can we act from a Sattvaguna, which is more contemplative, more corrective, more educative. That's my 2 cents on this.
Okay, Prabhuji, I got what you're saying. Okay, I understood. But what I'm saying is, if that person is correcting that other person, and even with diplomacy, like I've come for the class, with diplomacy, I try to tell somebody something. But if that other person still wants to act funny, still wants to misbehave, then what do we do with? For a simple example, it can be anybody's maid, for example. It can be anybody's maid. You tell them nicely, being very sattvic, because I've come for the class. Still, that person thinks because you've become soft that they can stand on your head. Then what do we do? I'm not talking about my personal this one. I'm talking in general, because I've seen many men and many women struggling with maids. But I'm giving you an example.
Yeah, Mataji, here what we can understand is that not everything is in our control. We are not the So that's what we need to understand, and that's where we need to switch on our other sattvic mode, which is tolerance. So we should tolerate, and tolerate to the extent that the things can go on properly. Otherwise, if the things are really out of control or not acceptable, then we may have to take a decision where we have to say sorry to the other person and say that, okay, we probably cannot continue further, and maybe we part our way. So that's how. But when the people are in mode of goodness, they do it in a way which is not so hurting and not so I would say destructive in the relationships. So that's where the intelligence plays a role, mode of goodness plays a role, like that. So the point is, we cannot control everything, and depending upon time, place, and circumstances, we make a decision on how to take the best possible course of action.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Hope the class was digestible.
Prabhuji.
Yeah.
You mentioned one thing, based on the past karmas, you may act as per goodness or passion or whatever in the tamogun. But we know that based on past karmas, we will get the body accordingly, correct? In this, whatever the birth, we will get the body based on the past karmas. But now, whatever in this birth, our karma will be more important to place us in, whether in Sattva-guna or Rajoguna or Tamoguna.
Yeah.
Then why the past karmas will now act again? Because we have already got the new body based on past karmas. So now whatever karmas you do in this birth will place you in whatever these 3 gunas, correct?
Yeah.
And then in the future birth, accordingly you will get the body.
Yeah. So this continues. This continues. So whatever past karma we have done, that is something which we are carrying with us. So we have to deal with it. We have to face it. If we have done good, we are going to get good reactions. If we have done bad, we are going to get bad reaction. Because it is we who have done that. We have to be accountable for all those reactions. But the point is, the person who understands this knowledge, what does he do? He doesn't behave in a way which actually deteriorates the karmic balance. He will like to act more in a goodness, and even not in goodness, even more in a devotional way, which can actually which can actually burn all the past karmas also. Not only create karmas, but actually burn the karmas. So the process of bhakti actually can burn the karmas. and will not create any new karmas also. And these karmas are burnt by process of bhakti at the seed level. Seed level means that some of the karmas are at the seed level. They have not sprouted. They might take some time to manifest. So even the seed is roasted. That is to the level the bhakti process can benefit us.
Okay. And one more question. Like
Yes.
you gave the example in 14.7 about the modern civilization. The Prabhupada ji, what he has said. I think typically it is a very true that man, woman gets attracted, then gets married, have children, family, and definitely the person will see that to keep family, he will try to earn money. So he will be in a mode of passion during that time, correct? And then you mentioned about two things. One is the goodness, and then you mentioned pure goodness, correct? So if I want to move to the first step from mode of passion to goodness, then definitely I have to be free from material detachment or fruitive activities and all these things. Then I will move to the mode of goodness. And the pure goodness is what you mentioned about the Krishna consciousness. This is what I got it. So is that the true, or is it correct, or anything you want to add on this?
Yeah. So that's what we said, that when the Lord is describing about the competition among the modes. So these modes are induced on us by way of karma, but it is not only induced. We actually also can make choices to promote certain kind of modes. It is not only that everything is given to us and we are bound to act like that. By making good choices, by making proper choices in our life, we can enhance our mode of goodness and control mode of passion and ignorance. So and for that you don't need to really, for example, attraction between man and woman. It is not that you have to leave your wife or your wife have to leave you to increase mode of goodness. No, simply by accepting those habits or those qualities or those actions which are in mode of goodness, both the whole family actually can elevate their consciousness. And that happens very simply, in a very easy way, when we take up to this process of devotional service, take up to this process of bhakti. So in bhakti, everything is good. What is bad about bhakti, isn't it? Everything is good. So we read good books like Gita, Mahabharata, Ramayana, Srimad Bhagavatam. We do these kind of discussions that we are doing now. We go to the temple. They promote charity. They kind of appreciate and encourage selflessness. All those things, seva, service, and we keep an association of these kind of people around us. So we certainly increase our mode of goodness, but at the same time, while increasing mode of goodness, if we keep on increasing our consciousness, this feeling that it is actually because of the Lord's mercy I'm able to do whatever I'm able to do in my life. So that gives us a servitude attitude, like of Lord Hanuman. That kind of or Lord Bharat Maharaj, he ruled Ayodhya on behalf of Lord Sri Ramachandra. He was 24/7, 365 days. He was thinking that this belongs to the Lord. This doesn't belong to me. So there is no ahankar. Although he is ruling Ayodhya in the best possible way, but he is not thinking it is actually I am ruling like that. It is actually only because the Lord Ramchandra's sandals are sitting on the throne, I am able to do like that. So this is what is meant by pure sattva, pure goodness, Vasudev state.
Very nice, Prabhuji. This was very nice lecture. Again, repetition of what we discussed earlier, but very nice. Dhanyavad.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Any other question?
May I ask a question?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, uncle.
What is the mode of giving curse and receiving curse? Because there are lots of stories in the literature that some sages gave curse to somebody, then someone suffered. So what is that mode? And how do we go about understanding that mode?
So
what kind out of the three modes that you have described?
Okay. I will ask a question to you. Did you ever slept your children when they were young, or spoke very harshly or in a loud voice or rebuked them when they were young?
Sometime, yes.
And why did you do that?
Because they were not understanding a thing which we were trying to make them understand.
Okay. So the bottom line is, for their good, you try to did that, right?
Yes.
So that is what the curses given by sages mean. When the sages curse, they actually try to clear and control some bad tendency in a person, and ultimately you will see in all these stories, these curse ultimately turn out to be a blessing. Ultimately, they turn out to be a blessing. For example, yeah.
The individuals who got cursed, they were miserable. Maybe their surroundings, maybe their sort of children and all those people, they also suffered in turn. I think it was only wasn't it the ego of those sages that perhaps was responsible for these curses, and not that as simple as that which you are trying to extract from me, that if a child is not accepting the advice, you try to be harsh to him. I think it was something more than that. It was an excessive use of ego, I suppose. Such wise people, such renowned people, they go for giving curses and all.
So first of all, we may have to discuss this on a case by case basis. So generally, the sages or people who are spiritually inclined, they have a more spiritual bent of mind. They are sages, jnanis, and maybe yogis. When they curse, they curse out of compassion for the living entity. Out of compassion means, for example, as I said, when a teacher beats a child and for correcting the child, or maybe that is mainly for his betterment. If you don't make a person understand by giving some punishment now, it might lead to a bigger problem in the future. So that is what that is how the curses of these sages actually have to be understood. Sometimes it may be, there might be stories where maybe some sage or somebody, out of maybe because of some lower modes, lower desires, may have cursed somebody out of ignorance or some reason like that. But in general, these sages, when they curse, they are actually meant for the benefit of the recipient of the curse. But we can discuss on a case by case basis, analyze these curses. So there are many in our scriptures. The stories are many.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Aishman Bhavashya